Ben Shapiro talked about the shadowy groups, the shadowy confederacy that nobody identifies, no one talks about. Well, that's simply not true, as anybody who's listened to this broadcast knows and has heard Alex name names for years,
with the receipts,
decades.
with their own videos, with their own books. But you do it even more than I. A whole library of them. I mean, it's a
We're
joke.
about to do it.
It's a joke. Oh, so this is a message
Everything
to Ben
behind
Shapiro.
me is naming names. So like the whole backdrop is naming names. And
well, look at David Rockefeller in Reflections. Of course, there's people accuse me of a conspiracy for world government to take over. Well, guilty as charged.
Yeah, David Rockefeller has multiple chapters in his memoirs about creating a global government, about helping to found Bilderberg. The book I'm reading right now is a CFR historian, Burton Hirsch. So this counts as something along the lines of Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley. This is the old boys. It's the history of the CIA and the OSS coming out of the wealthy families like the Rockefellers and support from the Rothschilds as well. British intelligence helps to set up.
And I'm going to shut up because you're a real historian on this. In fact, I should have thought of that. You're like the guy with their own quotes. These are their books. Most of them are their books bragging. He didn't just say that we never name the shadowy elites. He said we do it to make you feel powerless and to never give you policy. All we do is then develop policy ideas, many of which get adopted. Like everything he says is a lie. You want to play the short clips people have in context?
Yeah, please.
Guys, cue up Ben Shapiro. Last night attacking me and others. It goes on and laughing about the USS Liberty, saying the torpedo boats came to save them. The torpedoes were loving little gift packages. Here's a little Ben Shapiro.
We have a duty to propose solutions. That's why we have to talk about our problems in order to find the solutions. That's what politics was supposed to be about, after all. Finding solutions.
The public's just ignorant, then you can never get back control. And we've been getting back control. How about don't take the shots? Here's top experts. Up. Now I hand you the baton again.
He said that you never propose solutions when in fact this audience is the spearhead of waking people up to take action and to not be blackpilled. So really in logical fallacies, that's a straw man. He's setting up a position that Alex doesn't have, that we don't have. And then knocking that down and saying, see, if you listen to that guy, you're going to be blackpilled. You're going to be unable to take action in your life. But let's deal with the first part of it because it ended up being what I was planning to talk about today, which was, are there shadowy elites? Well, they're not really shadowy. Maybe in decades past, they were more shadowy. But a lot of these elites have published books. They've come out and they've said what their plans are. And as I've said many times on the fourth hour, I've heard Alex saying that for years, back 10, 15, 20 years ago. When I first heard Alex 22 years ago, and I thought what he said sounded a little far-fetched. I knew about the UN and the New World Order and these kinds of ideas and socialism and Marxism, but that they would be that explicit in their text was something that I just was a little skeptical about. So I went and started buying these books. And ever since then, on my channel, for example, we've lectured through them for the last 10 years. And I've been reading those texts for 22, 23 years. So it's very real. It's very public. But Ben Shapiro is counting upon the boomer mind matrix still controlling everybody in the neocon, normie conservative world, con Inc. world, that no, it's all just incompetence. It's all just, the libs. There's no plan. There's no Klaus Schwab. There's no Davos. There's no Bilderberg. There's no, AIPAC that's trying to run American foreign policy. No, none of that exists. All that exists is the libs, the incompetent, the retarded libs. Well, one of the most powerful, wealthy men in America, David Rockefeller, as we all know, he wrote a book called Memoirs. And on page 404, it's kind of even shocking that we have to still talk about and defend this. I mean, this is 2025. It's not 1995. I can understand normie conservatives, freaking out about this stuff back in the 90s. But this is 2025. This is after global policies around wearing BDSM masks to fight off some, virus that's going to kill everybody. This is not that era anymore. And I think Ben Shapiro doesn't realize he's cooked, to use the Gen Z term. His time is already over because people can, within a few seconds, go and look up and see David Rockefeller wrote a chapter called Proud Internationalist, where he says, if you say that I'm guilty of wanting a global government and a new order, I stand guilty as charged. Absolutely. And he says that's why I created the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, et cetera. That's not all he created. He says that we also were involved in supporting and funding the Dulles brothers, who were really sort of front people for the Rockefellers, and that's why they became the founders of the OSS and CIA, along with Bill Donovan and others, to really get that flagship deep state operation going. So if we get into the history, not from conspiracy theorists, the history from Council on Foreign Relationship archivists, much like Carol Quigley, there's one called written by Burton Hirsch, The Old Boys. The Old Boy Network is referring to the old OSS and CIA network, and even prior to that, back to the Woodrow Wilson administration, the Inquiry, which was a bunch of academics who operated as kind of the proto-CIA of that time. You know, even David Rockefeller's memoirs talks about the policies that the Dulleses, for example, had about the Nazis and perhaps helping the Nazis out. And that doesn't mean that Nazis are running everything, but it means that there are higher groups that want there to be wars. There are higher powers above nation states that can call the shots. And that's exactly what these NGOs, think tanks, foundations are created for, is to kind of be above the nation state level, to try to push policy, try to tell them what to do, particularly for these globalist designs. And you have right there in the chapter called Proud Internationalist, David Rockefeller admitting that that's his goal, that's his job. Now, there might be factions and divisions amongst the elites at times, and they can also join powers like mafia organizations do, or like Dons do. Alex has played that clip many times of the Godfather sitting around at the table with the other mafia Dons, the five families, and they're talking about whether they're going to start selling drugs or not. What we're talking about is similar to that. It's just on a bigger scale. It's not little sections of New York or the Bronx or whatever. It's global steering committees meeting together to decide global policy to enforce things like Malthusian policies of depopulation, to enforce things like international socialism, Fabian socialism, et cetera. All of those things have been pushed at a very high level, not just by one family, the Rockefellers, but by many elite families that, for example, Quigley, in his book, lists in many, many chapters. He says the Harrimans, the Rockefellers, the J.P. Morgans, the Schiffs, the Warburgs, the Rothschilds. So there's a confederation of these very wealthy, elite, oligarchical families that are smart enough to know how to construct these sort of impenetrable bureaucratic entities that have a kind of a criminal lockdown on the government. And that's why it's so difficult, even with a president who wants to change things, because there's an entrenched deep state, as everyone calls it. But the point is that that's not a conspiracy theory. And even the New York Times admitted a couple of years ago, thank God for the deep state, right? So now it does exist. It's just, by the way, a good thing. Before, it never existed, and you're crazy if you talk about it. And then it moves into the phase of, well, the deep state does exist, and here's why that's a good thing, right? All these gay journalism, fake and gay journalism titles. We actually have so many historical texts, and I studied in undergrad. I one class away from a double major in history and philosophy. So for me, history was very important. We don't know how we got to where we are if we don't understand where we were. So and history repeats. There's always these kinds of cycles. If you read somebody like Spengler, for example, who was very influential on Henry Kissinger's thought, Spengler talks about cycles of history and civilizations having a kind of a organic lifespan. And then they have a flourishing, and then they have a collapse after a while. And usually that collapse has to do with degeneracy, laziness, and the importation of third world or foreign entities to destroy the existing population. Weapons of mass migration, as Kelly Greenhill's book discusses. Well, the elites, the power elite, they know all about this, and they've studied this for many, many, many centuries, perhaps even millennia, if you go back into old elite families of the black nobility and the Medicis and those kinds of families. They've understood bureaucracy and how to manage big populations. But it's just a treasure, I would say, when we have admissions in the books. And a lot of people say to me, why do you care about what? So we know there's a New World Order. Who cares what these books say? Well, it's more than that. It's not just admissions, it's also understanding how they rule men, how they create organizations and steer them, co opt them, and even things like staging elections, throwing elections, how assassinations occur, because there's been a long history of elite assassinations and government officials being taken out. Most famously, we just had the Charlie Kirk assassination, which there are, I think, valid questions that should be asked. Doesn't mean I agree with everything that Candace says. It's just there's nothing wrong with asking these questions. If they want to weaponize question asking, it's the very thing that Ben Shapiro said. If you ask these questions, it's only because you're malicious. Well, there's nothing more effeminate than debating and calling into question everybody's motives, because you can't prove or disprove motives unless you have somebody's explicit DMs or emails saying, ha, ha, I have bad motives, I'm going to screw everything up. No, there's no way to prove or disprove motives. So it's a very shady, slimy tactic to say that the only reason Tucker or anybody would raise questions is because they have bad motives and they're funded by Qatar and all this nonsense, when the establishment itself has said many times over in their works, there are confederacies of open elites. It's not unknown, it's open. And so, for example, many writers who do write about this from more of a conspiracy critical perspective, they talk about a WASP Zionist alliance that has occurred in the last several decades. If you go from the time of when Quigley wrote Tragedy and Hope and Anglo-American Establishment, that was late 60s, 70s, and then 1982, I think, for Anglo-American Establishment, it kind of leaves off with, yeah, the Rothschilds are involved, but where then? Well, since the Cold War, there's been a WASP Zionist alliance. And that didn't play out that great for the WASPs over time, because they ended up losing a lot of power, especially in the domain of foreign policy, to the AIPAC Zionist Alliance. But in order to understand how we got to that, we have to understand that there was a desire to have a world war, not because everybody was in on it or everybody understood the full plan, but that the thought was that out of a world war, we could have global governance. If everyone saw how bad a giant global conflict was, then we could get what? League of Nations, World War I. Well, that didn't pass. It failed. The Wilsonian plans didn't come to full fruition. And Wilson was an agent of Colonel Edwin Mandell House, of the Rothschilds, of the British elite banking circles. So this is now on record, not just from Anthony Sutton and people that wrote about that many decades ago, but yet another global elite text admits that Colonel Edwin Mandell House played a key role in maneuvering, blackmailing, and positioning the Woodrow Wilson administration to ensure that America would begin its move towards soft socialism, Fabian socialism, capitalistic socialism. And it was very crucial to include and utilize figures like the Dulles brothers, Bill Donovan, and others. So when we talk about this book, Old Boys, which I'm going to be lecturing through the whole text on my channel on YouTube. If you want to see the full lectures, you can go follow me there. Is that the beginning of the American superstructure of intelligence is not necessarily OSS, it's the World War I era of the inquiry. And this included key figures like Colonel Edwin Mandell House, John Maynard Keynes, the famed Fabian socialist economist, even though he was not a member of their society. He is the preeminent economist for the world, the Western world, for the 20th century. Most institutions, most economic thinkers, New York Times writer people, et cetera, they are of the Keynesian ethos. They believe in the good of that war can actually help stimulate the economy, that printing money can stimulate the economy, et cetera. All of these principles that are opposed to, Austrian economics, et cetera. Keynesianism is what dominates, and all of the intelligence operative founders, for the most part, of the inquiry, OSS, CIA, were Keynesians. They were Fabian socialists in their economic ideology, even if they didn't become a member of some society. They had this ideology. And so it was Colonel Edwin Mandell House, according to Burton Hirsch, that dominated the Woodrow Wilson administration. And thus, British Secret Intelligence Service operatives were already working in the West, already working to make sure that Woodrow Wilson pushed his 14 points, et cetera, all the Wilsonian principles at the behest of the Royal Society Rothschild elites. That's who was really wanting this operation to go through. That's why we get the Federal Reserve. It's these people. It's Colonel Edwin Mandell House that pushed Woodrow Wilson to be a supporter of the Federal Reserve. And this is all Keynesian. It is the inquiry that dominates the Paris Peace Commission of 1919. And this is where people like Bill Donovan, excuse me, where people like Alan Dulles, the Dulles brothers, et cetera, they begin to get their start here. And they are members of a famous law firm called Sullivan and Cromwell. So the first several chapters of Burton Hersh's book deal with the history of Sullivan and Cromwell, British intelligence, Woodrow Wilson, et cetera, and all these figures kind of beginning this push towards America's move away from isolationism into internationalism. What did David Rockefeller say in his chapter? I'm a proud internationalist. In other words, America needs to be involved not just in every big global conflict, but needs to become an empire to police the world, to control the world, to run the world. And the problem is that when you move into that imperial ethos, this usually drags down the economy in the West or in the hub of the empire. It's not always necessarily a drag. It can be successful. Byzantium, for example, lasted. It's the longest lasting empire, the Eastern Roman Empire. But what happened was it opened the doors. It opened the doors to the Muslims. And you had the fall of Byzantium to Islam when it became a uniate Roman Catholic power, opening its doors to the Muslims, famously. Welcome back to the fourth hour of the Alex Jones Show. We are discussing the book, The Old Boys, an official Council on Foreign Relations historian's take on the origins of the OSS and CIA and even the pre-war intelligence period of World War I of the inquiry. We were talking about the infamous figure of Colonel Edwin Mandell House, who, by the way, wrote a book called Philip Drew Administrator about how a back channel, backdoor handler could control and cajole the president into doing what the secretive confederacy of shadowy people wanted done. So we're naming names. We're talking about people. And keep in mind, Burton Hersh is not a conspiracy theorist. He's a little bit on the left, you could say, historian from the Aspen Institute and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And this book is based on over 100 declassified texts. So much like Quigley or something like that, this is not in any stretch of the imagination a conspiracy text. It's all based on official documents, cables, et cetera, declassified papers. The book begins going into the history of the relationship between the Dulles brothers, Sullivan and Cromwell, and various big geopolitical operations. And the reason that law firms play a key role here is that these institutions are very interested in lawfare. As we know, for example, in Alex's travails, what he's had to deal with in terms of lawfare, this is really just the old CIA model of not just lawfare as attacking individuals, but writing international law so that certain companies, corporations, and entities can get around it so that they have an advantage. So if you're wealthy enough, if you're powerful enough, if you're a CIA-connected law firm like Sullivan and Cromwell was back in the days of the Dulles brothers, then you have the ability to, for example, create the Panama Canal. And that's exactly what was one of their first operations, was creating legally the Panama Canal using Sullivan and Cromwell. Another figure who came to prominence in these circles was a person named William Bullitt, and Bullitt. Bullitt was an early intelligence operative and ambassador, the first ambassador under the Wilson era up into FDR to the Soviets. And he pushed for the U.S. to recognize the Soviet Union. He pushed for a deal with Lenin that would allow the West and the U.S. to recognize the Bolshevik government, and in turn, Lenin would have to give up certain things like abandoning the persecution of the expatriate white Russians and end certain blockades. This ended up falling through, but you can begin to see that this was, again, a push when there was a Rockefeller Center run Bolshevik revolution that was all run out of New York, according to Anthony Sutton. And what we get from the Burton Hirsch book is essentially a vindication of what Anthony Sutton said, that the Bolshevik revolution was run out of Wall Street, not just by WASP corporations and banks and companies, but also by Zionist banking interests, including the Warburgs, the Schiffs, and others, and operatives like William Bullitt, who himself was a Jewish believer, or at least in some sense, he was maternally from his matrilineal descent was Jewish. I don't know how serious he was about it, but again, we notice that there's an often push for communism and socialism by individuals with this kind of an attitude. And although this failed and the League of Nations failed, you can see that the circles of Bullitt, the circles of Edwin Mandel House, and Bullitt worked directly with Colonel House. Bullitt also spent a lot of time in gallivanting around with Sigmund Freud. You can see the circles and the ideology at work here. Again, that's also the circles of Tavistock. Tavistock employed some of the ideologies of Sigmund Freud, some of the ideas of Freud. And another figure in the inquiry circles, probably the most famous figure in these circles of the pre-OSS-CIA intelligence apparatus, was Walter Lippmann. And Lippmann wasn't just known for his intelligence stuff. He was or his Tavistock affiliation. He was the creator of this, the founder of Public Opinion. His early book was Public Opinion, and how to steer and craft public opinion so that it would support any of the war efforts that the elite wanted, particularly the Rothschild Zionist elite wanting America to participate in World War I and World War II, but also all the way down to today's Tavistock studies on convincing people to accept the transgender agenda. And if you get deep into Tavistock, I mean, they're deeply involved in the critical race theory stuff. They have branches in Michigan, at Michigan University, that were pioneering studies on CRT, pioneering anti-white studies, et cetera. All of that comes out of Tavistock and these individuals. The book moves on to discuss, even after the failure of the League of Nations, these same entities turning again to figure out a way to create international bodies and institutions that could supposedly save the world from war. So the false, push for peace isn't really about that. It's about creating international entities and organizations that benefit these oligarchical elites like the Rockefeller Foundation, et cetera. And the Rockefellers make up a significant part of the next several chapters because while Bill Donovan, the original choice man for running the OSS, together with the British intelligence operatives that came and helped set that up, Bill Donovan began as a Rockefeller Foundation worker. He was an official, sort of representative attaché person who was involved in missions to send food supplies in various conflict zones. And then he gets recruited by J.P. Morgan to go and to meet with Lloyd George, the famous Labour Fabian socialist prime minister in the UK, who was working at the behest of Lionel Curtis and the Fabian socialists and the Rothschilds to push socialism in the UK. Well, that ended up impressing a lot of people. And although Donovan didn't immediately get appointed to a high-level position, Herbert Hoover was impressed with him, but appointed him to a lesser position in the Philippines. But this allowed him to get more intelligence experience and more of his adventurism and whatnot. And eventually, he gets promoted to being the head of the OSS, appointed to the head of that. And this is at a period too when we're supposedly in the midst of, the dangers of Nazi Germany. There's all of this threat, and it turns out the Dulles brothers, not only are they aiding and supporting the financiers of Hitler, like Hjalmar Schacht, Fritz Thyssen, and others, who was part of the United Steel cartel, people like Albert Vogler. It turns out the the Dulles brothers all end up supporting and doing law work to help not just the people around Tiny Mustache Man, but also Franco. Now you might think, well, people are beginning to popularize and think that Hitler's a good guy now, and they're fans of all that. Well, the Dulles brothers are, first of all, they're not Christian. They're not into any kind of like really based kind of right wing politics. They're really just power political players, and they see the the cause of Hitler as something that really isn't worth America getting involved in. So they had a kind of an America First view, and America First at that time just simply meant not being involved in foreign conflicts and not fighting in World War II. But the problem is that they're not some sort of based anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist law firm. They're actually pro-Zionist. So you could be both. You could be aiding and supporting the rise of Hitler and working at the Schroeder Bank and working at these other banks that helped to fund and aid Hitler, and also supporting Zionism. And I point this out quite often. Some months ago, I was in studio with Alex, and I talked about the dual appeasement strategy that the British elites had to goad Hitler into attacking because they wanted World War II to happen. And on Twitter, it just erupted in a firestorm. There was several, if you total it up, there was a few millions of views, and just thousands and thousands of the Nazi bots, the botsies on Twitter, coming after me, attacking me, all the neo-pagan retards are coming at me. Why? Well, because it's impossible, because Hitler arrested a couple Rothschilds, seized a few of their properties in Austria and their banks. And so there's no way that there could be establishment support for Hitler. Well, here's another book admitting that the Dulles law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, that they were helping all of the pro-Franco, pro-fascist, pro-Hitler law firms, and they were also pro-Zionist. And in fact, when people complained about Dulles, he would just simply say, well, I've aided and supported all kinds of Jewish, Zionist, and banking interests. And if you really get into this, there's not a real conflict here, because even Hitler and the Nazis early on in the Havara Agreement supported the exporting of Jews to Palestine. And so Hitler was actually pro-Zionist. He wanted Jews to leave. He thought that would be better for them. And so the cartel system that existed in Germany at that time, the Dulles brothers saw this as a great means to step in. And because Germany was in debt, the German economy was pretty bad. The Weimar economy was bad. The Dulles brothers also saw an economic situation here that we could step in. If we fund a lot of this, we'll have a huge stake in the future of Germany. And so Kurt Schroeder, the banker, was working hand in hand together with the Dulleses, as they also supported a homeland for the Jews in Palestine, pro-Zionist. In fact, Dulles says that he was an acquaintance of and a supporter of Chaim Weizmann and his Zionist project. So the Warburgs, Kuhn and Loeb, etc., they were at that time.
Okay, so here's what's happening. This guy is talking a lot about a certain type of demographic, and it's not allowed on YouTube. I thought he was going to be naming the names of the secret societies, because that's the title of the video.
Opposing Hitler,
oh,
but
shit.
Sullivan and Cromwell.
And yet he's talking about a whole bunch of other stuff there. So I'm going to attempt to search for something else while he talks a little bit, but I'm just about to cut this off.
Alan Dulles and others were actually working together for the Rothschilds, get the land, and the banks that were seized in Austria by Hitler to get that back for the Rothschilds. So the story goes much deeper than good guy, bad guy. People always want to try to portray this as, well, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy? It's a lot deeper than that. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of power players trying to get a hold of corporations and companies.
YouTube, chicks.
Oh man, the streets are officially over, you guys. It's time to pack it up, everybody. It's time to go get your CDLs. Now, a couple days ago, after 21 Savage reached out to a bunch of rappers from ATL to squash their beef, seems like pretty much everybody's on board. Just last night, Future and 21 Savage got on FaceTime to squash their issues. And just last night, you guys, Quavo and Offset also got on FaceTime to squash their beef again for the third time, I believe. And now it seems like everyone is officially getting on board with his campaign. A couple days ago, 21 Savage tweeted at Gunna and Thugger saying, yo, y'all fix that shit. Y'all love each other. You knew Gunna wasn't no gangster when he told the first time, and we swept it under the rug for you. You know he wasn't trying to leave you to hang. Fuck the streets. We ain't get shit but trauma from that shit. Well, looks like a lot of rappers are now joining in on the Fuck the Streets campaign with 21 Savage. Today, Young Thug started the campaign. He said fuck the streets at 21 Savage. And then CEO Big 30 also tagged 21 Savage and he said fuck the streets. I want billions. Then we had G Herbo, Pooh Shiesty, YFN Lucci, Chick Smooth, and also Duty Low. Even Rollo also came out and said fuck the streets as well.
How the hell can another get mad at another for saying F the streets? Half of y'all ain't even succeeded in the streets. Well, I ain't gonna say half, but most ain't even succeeded in the streets. Ain't stepped on that, ain't putting that down. But saying, oh, saying, listen, dog, I know for a fact, me, myself, I ran up 10 million out these streets. Facts, not opinions. So if I want to say F the streets, I can say F the streets. And I have benefited from the streets on the highest level. 1 house, 2 house, 3 apartments, plaza. After I lost 18 million. So can't no tell me what I can say. And I'm 100% with the Fuck the Streets movement. This is from Rollo Terrell Davis, and I sponsor that.
So with other streets rappers coming together to officially condemn the streets, this of course brought a lot of controversy online. A lot of people said, hey, wait a minute. Don't you guys think you're being just a little bit tone deaf right now? How can you guys continue to promote the streets and kill in your music, but now you want to say fuck the streets? For all we know, you guys could have just gotten into a shootout last week. Maybe it's the cold weather right now. Everybody's inside the house with their families. Christmas is right around the corner next week. So of course, everybody's going to be on board with this Fuck the Streets campaign. Now, some people also think that this is a plan for them to get Gunna to start making music with them again. Because right now, everybody's damn near flopping. Nobody's music is hitting like it used to with Gunna. All the street rappers are now looking for an excuse to work with Gunna again. And nobody wants to be looked at as a hypocrite, especially after calling him a rat.
If you're watching this video, you about to hear some fucking facts. And people don't like the truth because it hurts them. I was going to do this video on TikTok. You know where you put the picture in the background and you start talking? But these facts right here need 100-inch. You see this bitch-ass sticker right here? Yo, listen, they going to skip this. The facts hurts people's feelings. I just need y'all to know that. If I'm lying, I'm flying. Now, hear this out. This bitch-ass sticker says, yo, hold on, let's start with this. Gunna, Young Thug, y'all fix that shit. Y'all love each other. Knew Gunna wasn't no gangster when he told the first time. When he told the first time. And we swept it. We, not them. We, as the whole Atlanta. We swept it under the rug for you. You know, he wasn't trying to leave you to hang, nigga. Fuck the streets. Now it's fuck the streets when it's convenient for you. The album sales is not selling. The Drake stimulus pack is not selling. Now y'all talking about, yo, fuck the streets. I've been talking about this 5 years ago. Y'all bend and break the rules when it's convenient for y'all. When he told the first time. So you know, homie, a rat. But it's convenient for me, yo. My best friend could rap. You from Atlanta? He could rap. But y'all niggas can't. No, it's different. Bro, it's different. I've been saying this for 5 years. When he told the first time, we swept it under the rug. Where the morals? Ain't you a street nigga? Where your principle? Where your honor? You know whom you rap, but you swept it under the rug? It get worse. QCP, I told you to your face, you did wrong at the party, but I never bashed you on the internet. Why? Because it would have made the city look bad. Because you was putting all the young niggas on. And that would have fucked up the money. So you ready to eat from a rat? What happened to all good money? All money not good money. Y'all was just bashing Kodak.
Now, I'm not sure if this is all a coincidence or not, but I do have to let you guys know. A couple days ago, 21 Savage's album, What Happened to the Streets, was projected to sell 53K first week. Well, after a couple viral tweets about the streets, 21 Savage is now projected to debut at number 2 on the Billboard 200 with 90K units sold. Damn near doubling in sales, you guys. That's pretty amazing to me. Now, me personally, I think this is all a marketing strategy for a deluxe album. Anytime I see rappers all simultaneously tweeting the same thing, it tells me that it's marketing and promo. Y'all remember a couple years ago when Thugger was locked up and everybody started tweeting business is business? Then we eventually get to find out that that was actually the name of his upcoming album. I feel like this is the same exact thing happening right now. All these street rappers are not magically going to stop making street music and start making R&B or country music. To me, this feels like a rollout for something bigger. And I'll be honest with you guys, as far as Gunna, it seems like Gunna wants no parts of reuniting with anybody from ATL besides the only 2 people that never switched up on him, and that's Offset and Thugger's dad. Don't ask me why Gunna still kicks it with Thugger's dad, but yet he ignores the fuck out of Thugger. After supporting Gunna early on when he came out of prison and everybody was wondering, yo, does Thugger still rock with him? Thugger's dad showed up recently at one of Gunna's shows. Either way it goes, you guys, I'm actually glad this is the message these rappers are putting out. If this is what it takes to stop shooting and killing each other, I'm on board with it. I'm just hoping these guys actually mean it and it's not some kind of marketing ploy for music. You guys get in the comments below. What do you guys make of these fuck the streets tweet from most of these street rappers? Like this video, subscribe to my channel.
And why was this? Well, it turns out that they understood there was a war coming, and whoever could have a stake in those countries in the coming post-war period would then be able to rebuild, and it would be a whole new market that was created. In fact, Sutton has a whole chapter discussing that the New York corporate firms, Wall Street firms, and Jewish banking firms understood that when there was a Bolshevik revolution, this would open up Russia to being rebuilt by the West to huge corporate power and banking power, to huge markets, in other words. So it's not just about, wars are not
Boy,
just
howdy, I can't believe it. The title is not clickbait. This is big. Color me blue and call me a smurf. I'm looking real stupid right now because I've been quite the Scrooge bah humbugging, saying that it'll never happen. They'll never release the Epstein files. And look what happens. Random Friday evening, they drop these puppies. Oh, you know, the same Epstein files that the government also tried to say aren't real are actually a huge hoax and you're an idiot if you believe in them. They're like the Tooth Fairy or something, no such thing. Oh, well, here's those Epstein files that we said not long ago weren't real, by the way. Finally, all of the information on all of these evil pedophiles right here at our fingertips. We get one sentence and then pretty much everything else redacted. And this isn't some isolated incident where I'm cherry-picking shit. The bulk of these files are heavily redacted, and heavily doesn't even do it justice. It's so beyond that. Like, it is redacted to a comical degree where it would be laughable if it wasn't just so blatantly evil. Like, look at the thumbnail here. You could close your eyes and see the same thing that these files show you, which is just nothing. Darkness. I always said if they do release it, it'll probably be heavily redacted. I didn't even expect it to be this extreme. This is crazy. They don't even let like a couple of like rogue words fly, like random like the or and. It's all just blacked out emptiness. They released hundreds of pages of it's unfucking believable. Yeah, we've really got these evil pedophiles on the ropes now that the most transparent administration in history has dropped these puppies fresh on our laps here. Look at this. Wow. We've really got them now. We've got them cornered. Surely they'll be held accountable with this out there.
Talk about blacking out. I don't know if I can get a close up of my phone. This is one of the documents that the Justice Department released. It's 100 pages.
Right,
This is what it looks like. I don't know if you can see. It's all black. It's just 100 pages of redaction. That's the transparency we're getting here.
Right, and I'll point to...
This is like the LaCroix of Epstein files, where it's the idea of the files themselves, not actually providing anything. Imagine scrolling through those 100 pages of just pure void emptiness. What the fuck? That is absurd. Now, it's not just these empty files that they plopped out there in the open. They did also provide a lot of new photos that show people like Bill Clinton with Jeffrey Epstein and Maxwell, as well as like Chris Tucker, even Michael Jackson. Like, there were a large amount of photos that weren't previously public. And in those photos, there are individuals whose identity is redacted. They have like the giant black square over them. They've been censored. And I thought that was supposed to be for victims, you know? But according to what I read, this actually comes from Fox News. They said the Justice Department redacted the names and identifiers of victims. Fox News Digital has learned that the same redaction standards were applied to politically exposed individuals and government officials. What the fuck? Why would those same redaction standards be applied to politically exposed individuals? That's like the most important individual to be exposed in these Epstein files. Why would that under any circumstances be suitable for a redaction? That's fucking crazy. So, like, they can just be censored out like it's fucking Super Smash Bros. Melee when you're about to unlock a new fighter through, like, a challenge approaching you. Why? That makes no sense. That should just be reserved solely for the victims here. I don't understand, if this is true, why they would be able to redact that kind of information on politically exposed individuals. And it doesn't apply to all politically exposed individuals, clearly, because Bill Clinton is completely unmasked here. He is just, like, raw out in the open in these photos, as well as others, like I mentioned. So it was, I guess there was exceptions for some of them. I'm not exactly sure how the ruling all worked. There's like a bunch of like nuance to it here. It's very confusing, but under no circumstances should there have been exceptions for these politically exposed individuals in the Epstein files and photos.
Ideologies, and we're saving the homeland against the invaders. Wars are actually fought in the modern era for cartels. And that's what Burton Hirsch admits in the first several chapters of his book, is that German cartels had a huge impetus and motivation for there to be a war. And so they were all involved in eventually hopping on to support Hitler and the war effort. Not everyone. For example, the Warburgs and the Schiffs, Kuhn and Loeb, some of those interests did oppose Hitler. But it doesn't follow from that there were no Western elite Wall Street corporate banking interests supporting Hitler, because there were. Again, this backs up another
Rich
one
had
of
to go over with
the books by Sutton, Wall Street.
Right, so this is Jordan Tower with JT News. Make sure you smash that like button, smash that subscribe, and let's get right into the news. All right, so Orlando rapper Glock 9 is accused of cooperating and giving up information about 4 murders in exchange for a deal. We'll read this at the end, but bro, this guy was always in jail. It was a matter of time before he was like, yo, I got to do something to get out of this because I'm about to go to jail for the rest of my life. And that's a fact, okay? All right, so we got Young Thug denouncing the streets with 21 Savage, and then everybody follows suit because the industry is nothing but lemmings, okay? And if 21 Savage and Young Thug are doing it, hey, let's all be cool today. Is it a good thing to denounce the streets? Yes. So don't get me all twisted here and be like, yo, Jordan, you just want the demise of people. No. It just doesn't mean anything. These guys are rappers. These guys are rappers who came from the hood, and they put on a street persona, and now they're trying to put down the street persona because they're going to jail behind it, okay? And, yeah, this is like a new thing. But if Young Thug doesn't forgive Gunna after this, Young Thug is a sucker to me. Like, I'm gonna be honest. I used to really have a lot of respect for him, a lot of respect, because I've seen him help people, a lot of people in Atlanta. Not even what's on the what makes it more real to me the whole time, this is before he got arrested, is it was never on Instagram. Never on Instagram. He would I saw him pay people's rent for a year that were friends of his, people that helped him in the beginning. I saw him get them back on their feet. I respect things like that. And you don't want any clout for it or anything. Things like that make me think, okay, this person's a real person. But when he got Gunna hemmed up, because Gunna was his artist, and Gunna did what everybody else did, including Young Thug's blood brother, took a plea, but his was on tape, and he called him a snitch. I was like, bro, this is your fault. You got your artist hemmed up out here. So just, like, let it be what it is, you know? And you're lucky you got out of the jam. Young Thug had nobody to snitch on. Nobody. If he had somebody to snitch on, who knows if he wouldn't have done it. He sat down with the police for, you know, at the Golden Corral buffet for 5 hours and, you know, had 5 different meals and told them everything he knew. So, of course, Tekashi reacts. He says, now it's F the streets, but remember when it was, yo, 6ix9ine, we don't care about your platinum records. We platinum in the streets, but now it's F the streets. Yeah, because these guys aren't selling anymore. Meek Mill even joined in after G Herbo said F the streets. Meek Mill was like, me too, man, for life, bro. When Meek Mill, all he does is preach the streets. Yo, we from the streets. Yo, it's treacherous out here. We run the streets, man. Remember that? All these guys did what the damage is done. These guys have had 5-10 years into the game already. They've already done the damage. They've already influenced a generation. Meek Mill says they pushing Meek's bad social media rep narrative. They never mention the change I make or real stuff I do, helping young men in music change the directions of their lives. Cap. Bro, who have you put on? You helped Rod Wave a little bit, and he gives not Rod Wave. What's his name? Racks in the middle, in the box. What am I talking about? You know who I'm talking about. Why am I having see, this is what, when you haven't been in the spotlight for a long, this is what happens. Roddy Ricch. Okay, Roddy Ricch. Okay, so Roddy Ricch, he kind of helped him, but he wasn't doing anything. So Roddy Ricch had to go over with Nipsey, and then eventually something took off. But Meek, a lot of artists have been under Meek and did nothing. And they got to go somewhere else. Young Blue. He had to go with Boosie. He says, young men in the music change their lives. I speak out on term of social media because it's not reality. It's separate from who I am. Meek's just a cornball, bro. I swear. And I'm not saying I'm the coolest person. It's just that, like, Meek speaks too much, blah, 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 and nothing. He couldn't even make O'Malley. Nobody. He didn't put anybody all the way on. He kind of, like, gave someone to look sometimes. But did he ever help Nip? Never. Never helped Nipsey Hussle. Go find me a record where he helped him. Nipsey had to do it on his own. The Game, Snoop, other people helped him. But Meek tries to rep him as much as he can. But you, just because you guys talked on the phone a few times, you didn't do anything. You didn't shoot any of me videos. So I shot videos with Nip in the beginning. I didn't have to. He wasn't popping like that. Let's be real. I'm talking about 09. Even Meek got shot video for. He was good in the city, but like on a larger scale, it wasn't much. Didn't do anything for me, but I liked Meek's music. Pooh Shiesty, traumatized. F the streets. See, everyone's just following suit. A lot of these guys are just bad kids. Doesn't mean you're street, right? YF and Lucci, F the streets. Okay. See? Another person involving themselves in the streets as a rapper, and then someone ends up getting shot and killed. That doesn't make you street all of a sudden. It makes it like, oh my gosh, this went too far. These guys will cosplay the streets so much. If something really bad will happen, they'll go to jail. And I like all these guys as rappers, but they're rappers. There's rappers and there's street guys, okay? There's a difference. The rappers aren't influencing the street. It's the other way around. Little Zay Osama says, the streets made you guys who you are today. All you guys glorify the streets. A lot of you guys put on a street persona. For so long, all the so-called street guys ratting. Now, so F the streets got it bad, and it's good for guys saying F the streets to befriend another wannabe street guy, telling I don't respect it 100. If you see a D-sucking Chicago rapper saying F the streets, you guys just as corny as I thought y'all were for real. Because a lot of you guys wasn't street anyways. It was guys around y'all. Facts. And that's where it goes. Like, when you're famous as a rapper, you attract the streets around you, and that makes these guys feel like they're street. Like, yo, I'm from the streets, man. You're not. You're being used and abused by the streets to get into shows, do whatever you are offering, you know? Whatever. Maybe sometimes people from the street just want to have a little notoriety. They want to get a little more Instagram followers. It's true. And they'll hang out with you. That's it. It helps them get some more girls. Says, I love the way the street supported me the whole way. I ain't in them like I used to, but I still respect and love the street guys, she says. We'll get to 50 Cent in a minute. Then Rollo speaks out, and he says, a lot of you guys didn't do anything in the street. You had no success in the streets. Your success came in rap music.
How the hell can another nigga get mad at another nigga for saying F the streets? Half of y'all ain't even succeeded in the streets. Well, I ain't gonna say half, but most of these niggas ain't even succeeded in the streets. Ain't stepped on that, ain't putting that down. But saying, oh, them niggas saying that. Listen, dog, I know for a fact, me, myself, I ran up 10 million out these streets. Facts, not opinions. So if I want to say F the streets, I can say F the streets. And I have benefited from the streets on the highest level. 1 house, 2 house, 3 apartments, plaza. After I lost 18 million. So can't no nigga tell me what I can say. And I'm 100% with the Fuck the Streets movement. This is from Rollo Terrell Davis, and I sponsor that.
Now, here's the thing. You got to know when to leave the streets as a rapper, right? 21 Savage and them should have been left not even talking about it anymore. Like, yo, I respected that somebody. You graduate. You move on. Now you're doing legit money. That's every person that I met that's really from the street, right? Like, that's someone that was really making money in the street. They can't wait to make legit money because now you don't have to look behind your back and everything, right? QCP talks about it all the time. He's like, I hated being in the streets because I have all this like he wanted to put his unlegit money to work to become legit money, and he did. He bet all the money he ever made in the street on rap, and it worked. Now here's $100 million of real legit money. All right, so let's get Duty Low. Come on, Duty Low. You got swept up in an off block in Atlanta trying to get some wings. Somebody shot you in your leg, bro. little Kenny, F the streets, that's paper. We'll get to Glock 9 in a second. Then we got Tekashi keeps the pressure on these people. As they need to have the pressure on them. Tekashi said, now it's F the streets, but remember when it was like, yo, 6ix9ine, don't care about, he said that many times before. It's so funny, man. These people flip-flop. 50 Cent says, damn, man. They all were accepting this weird behavior. Yo, a lot of people, I seen Diddy and Ross, like, hugging each other, like, in 4K in front of me before. Like, on some weirdo stuff. This was, like, 2010. Damn near kissing, bro. And Diddy was saying all these sexual things to him. And I was like, whoa, pause. I was like, Diddy is someone to stay away from. This guy is too flagrant. And this guy, what's his name? Sly Diggler. He talks about how Diddy has a micro machine, basically. And he would smash 50 Cent's baby mom with Diddy. And 50 Cent reaction was this dirty little sex worker talking about his baby mom. Was working 2 or 3 at a time. Vlad, I want that tape. I guess there's a tape out of Diddy and this guy smashing his baby mom. Before, tech influencer, I don't know if you guys remember Lamar Wilson. He passed away, took his own life, man. I think he was 47. No, he's 48. Oh, that says it right there. I'm sorry. That's sad, man. I used to watch this guy like a long time ago on YouTube. He stopped making long form videos and just made like shorts. But like he would review tech and stuff. I thought it was cool. Like I used to watch him and a couple other people. And man, it's sad. It's sad, bro. Condolences to his family. Then we got Glock 9. Should we read through some of this paperwork? He's telling on people, basically. He says, you dealt with him for years. Yes, I'd known him for many years. All right, where was blank at? April 6, 2023. Mr. Smith was your client. He was in federal prison in West Virginia. All right. And did you find out that Detective Fields was another police officer that traveled to West Virginia to interview him? Yes. And how did you find that out? When I got off the plane, I was speaking with Detective Fields, and he told me about it. We had a good conversation about what had just occurred. At least I say good conversation, but it gave me a very quick outline of what had occurred. So he's just agreeing to take other people down? We can do a deeper dive in this later. This will take about 10 minutes to go through. But yeah, man, that just shows you, like, people will, like, if they have the opportunity to dime out other people, most of the time, that's what will happen. They'll get dimed out, and they'll to save themselves. Not many people want to do 10, 20, 30 years. And Glock 9 has been arrested so many times that they're going to lock up and throw away the key at this point, you know? So, just let that be a lesson. All right. Well, we'll get to this later. It's Jordan Tower with JT News. Smash that like button. Smash that subscribe button. Share this video. Like this video. Happy holidays. Thank you so much for watching me. I appreciate you all so much. You don't even understand. And thank you. Peace.
And the rise of Hitler. So this is that's a Hudson Institute writer writing about this. And here's a CFR guy writing about it and admitting it. Yeah, sure. Of course, there was a lot of support from the Dulles brothers, who represented not just Hitler associated corporations and cartels, but also Franco's corporations and businesses. And they did this indirectly. And that's probably because some of them they probably were fascist. I mean, there were plenty of people in the British establishment, the Malthusian sort of British elites, the king himself at one point, Wallace Simpson, a lot of those people favored the Nazi ideology. And again, this is not a good guy, bad guy scenario. This is all just the reality of the power struggle and power situations. Some of these people, by the way, eventually went to go write Hollywood screenplays. They wrote a lot of the films in the 1930s and 40s. In fact, in my third book, Esoteric Hollywood 3, I go into some of the circles of British intelligence that sent screenwriters to Hollywood. One of the women was named Helen McInnes, and she literally wrote several films for British intelligence to convince Americans to get involved in the war effort. Now, she didn't write every Hitchcock film, but you can see in the case of some of the Hitchcock films, Hitchcock was in the Cordes circle pushing in Hollywood also to get America involved in World War II. So films like Saboteur in 1942, where you have Nazi networks in the U.S. sabotaging and committing, espionage, et cetera, which actually there is some truth to that. There was actually a network of German espionage in the U.S. Under the guidance of a guy named Heinrich Albert, together with Franz von Papen and a guy named Gerhard Vestrick. They were running and involved in nationwide assassination and espionage operations on the part of Germany. And I think eventually Vestrick and I think Albert were expelled from the U.S., but that's because they were also, at least in the case of Vestrick, was working with the Dulles brothers. So this is also the birthplace of Operation Paperclip as well, right? So Paperclip plays a role in this, and Gehlenorg, which is Reinhard Gehlen's European espionage network for the Nazis. Once the Nazis lose, it's the CIA just sort of takes over those networks. And that's the origin of today's German BND. The German intelligence is originally the Gehlenorg network. That doesn't mean that today's German intelligence are Nazis. They're totally insane. Like, just like all of the other European, networks, they're all just totally basically, cucked, tranny supporting lunatics now. And that's where we are, is that, you can say what you will about World War II. I'm not pro-fascist, but what ended up winning wasn't Western capitalism. What ended up winning World War II and what ended up becoming the basis for the EU was Fabian socialism. That's socialism combined with Western capitalism. That's what's also being pushed, not just by people like Woodrow Wilson and, Colonel Edwin Mandel House and these figures back at the time of World War I and, the establishment of the Federal Reserve, but also people like Louis Brandeis. So the Supreme Court was very infested with open socialist judges at this time. You had a vice president who was a Fabian socialist as well, communist, openly. So these networks, these infiltrators, these are all very real, but even Hollywood can exaggerate this, right? There's films like Above Suspicion, which I think was written by Helen McInnes, the British intelligence operative, Reunion in France, Foreign Correspondent, even Hitchcock's Notorious in 1946. These are all basically propaganda films. And I'm not saying they're bad films. Many of them are excellent. They're very well made, very well done films. But they're also part of the propaganda war effort. And, going back after reading a lot of this material and watching a lot of 1940s, 50s, films, like you can see how many of these films are also propaganda. It's so transparent. Nowadays, of course, you go back in time and people had no clue about how sophisticated propaganda was. But long story short is that, Chase Bank, all of these entities are connected through the Dulles to the Schroeder Trust and the Swiss agreement. And this is where that long rumored legend story of Nazi gold and stolen loot being somehow spirited out to Switzerland and Swiss banks and whatnot. Well, Burton Hirsch's book actually touches on that, and that has to do with the Dulles helping these groups get around international laws and blockades, because America had economic sanctions against Germany. And the Rockefeller Investment Banking Combine, which was a combination of Avery Rockefeller, Kurt von Schroeder, and the Dulles brothers, aiding them to legally get around certain international laws so that corporations could still, like Royal Dutch Shell, support Hitler in the war effort. And any time that Alan Dulles would be questioned about it, he would just simply say, well, I helped out Jewish bankers too. So he didn't really deny it. He just said, well, look, I help everybody. So that's, we're a law firm. That's what we do. But to get around the sanctions, to in some way, take some of this, get some of this Nazi loot spirited away. Nobody knows exactly what happened to all that or where it went. It's a kind of a famous historical legend. Well, my guess would be that it has something to do with what Burton Hirsch is talking about here. And this is not antithetical to Zionist interests either. So people think, oh, well, so you're just talking about how Nazis are bad and you won't talk about, no, we're saying that there's power elites. Sometimes they disagree. Even amongst the British power elite, you had a faction that were Arabophiles who were obsessed with Islam. They loved Arab and Islamic culture. People like T.E. Lawrence, people like Gertrude Bell, people like St. John Philby, people, even amongst the Royal Society elite, the Lionel Curtises and these kinds of people. But you also had people who were pro-Zionist in the Rothschild circles amongst those elites. And even some of the spies like T.E. Lawrence, sometimes he sounds like a rabid Zionist and sometimes he sounds like a rabid, Islamic anti-Zionist. So with these kinds of power players, they can flip sides, they can, flip-flop, they can support both sides. That's also a possibility. People overlook the possibility of funding and supporting both sides. And, just because one family or branch of Rothschilds gets arrested in Germany by Hitler, it doesn't follow from that the Rothschilds aren't also involved at some level through international banking interests in wanting a world war. It just simply means that Hitler started doing things that people who originally goaded him on didn't necessarily want him to do. Just like Saddam Hussein might be supported and aided by the U.S. and the CIA, he's trained by the CIA, and then he comes to power and, well, he starts doing things off script, and, well, it's time to get rid of Saddam Hussein. So all these things are possibilities. It doesn't follow from this that there was no Western banking corporate elite support for Hitler or that there wasn't Hitler support for Zionist interests. In fact, the nation state of Israel, you could argue, couldn't even have been established. There wasn't even a justification for the United Nations recognition of Israel in 1948 had it not been for Hitler in World War II. I'm not saying it was good. I'm just saying that's the reality of the justification for the establishment of the nation state of Israel and its acceptance by the United Nations in 1948. That's all because of what Hitler did in World War II in the 1940s. So the pressure is from all sides here, and there's not good guys and bad guys necessarily. I'm not saying there's not heroes in wartime. I'm just saying, like, to look at big scale 20th century geopolitics and to try to figure out the good guy versus the bad guy is just a very naive, simplistic, approach. And it overlooks the fact that, communists in Russia killed something like 60 million people, right? Okay. And many of them were Orthodox Christians. There were dozens and dozens more millions believed to be killed by Mao than even in Russia. So if there's 30, 60, 90 million people being killed over there, but the only thing that matters in the West is the 6 million or so allegedly in the Holocaust. Well, why are those lives more mystically valuable than all the others? And I'm not saying there weren't Jews killed. I think Jews were killed. But I'm saying there's nothing about that DNA that makes them more powerful or more mystically special than the Christians that died in Russia. So democide is a problem all around. And there's no, it's just absurd to pick one group to say, oh, they're the only group that really matters. The rest of the millions of people that died, they're lesser. That's all Israeli first propaganda. That's what Ben Shapiro represents. I've asked for years to debate Ben Shapiro. Of course, he's not going to debate me. He's not going to debate Alex or anybody who would give him real pushback. Ben Shapiro is a dual citizen, and he represents a foreign interest. And his time is passing away. People are tired of all of that propaganda, and they're waking up to America being put into the primary position. This is Jay's Analysis. I'm Jay Dyer. You can go watch my stuff on my channel.